Good evening, friends. Okay, so we'll talk about our next topic. This topic is not mentioned as a part of perspectives in human geography, but I would like to deal with this topic because this topic is mentioned in our syllabus in models and theories topic. Okay, so it was something because system analysis in geography became very popular during the period of quantitative revolution, and very frequently system analysis is associated with quantitative revolution, and that is why we are talking about here it along with quantitative revolution. Okay, very important topic here. And okay, so if we talk about system analysis, at the beginning itself, I would like to differentiate two terms here. One is essentially system analysis, and other term is here general system theory. General system theory. Okay. So if you talk about system analysis essentially is a tool or an instrument to solve, or we can say a method essentially to solve geographical problems. ठीक है. If you talk about general system theory is essentially an attempt to formulate a meta theory in geography which can be applicable across the various branches of geography, which can be applicable along various branches of geography. Okay. So can you understand what is basically difference between the two terms, system analysis and general system theory? Tell me fast. We have already seen what is difference between a method and a theory. बताओ मुझे यार फास्ट। सिलेबस में व्हाट इज मेंशनड? इन द सिलेबस इट इज मेंशनड सिस्टम एनालिसिस इन ह्यूमन ज्योग्राफी, ठीक है। बट indirectly, particularly associated with quantitative revolution, there can be questions also on general system theory. So can I now believe on you that if there is a question, you will be able to differentiate whether the question is asking about system analysis or whether it is asking about general system theory? Can we rely upon you? Yes, different branches here mean physical and human geography both. Okay. So with this, once you have understood the difference between these two terms, now first we'll talk about system analysis, and then I will also deliberate something on the general system theory. So system analysis. So very important thing is geography. What it does, it deals with very complex and diverse functionalities and relationship between the biotic and abiotic components. And among the biotic components, such intricate relationship produces highly complex reality. We have already seen that geography wants to study reality as it is. So it produces a very highly complex reality which is difficult to understand and grasp. Okay? Geography, unlike other sciences, tries to study this reality as it exists in nature. This very uniqueness of geographical discipline calls for development of a framework to enable geographers to analyze these complex geographical phenomena. And one such framework which is provided to geography is the system analysis framework. Okay, we will see what is system analysis, but that is basically the context of system analysis. So can you understand this statement or this paragraph? It is so much complex that where to start, where to stop, again it is quite difficult to grasp. If we have a kind of framework through which can tell me where to start, how to link all these complex phenomena, we can definitely say then the study would become quite easy for me. Okay? System analysis became very popular during the quantitative revolution phase. Its development can be traced back to the attempts of Ludwig von Bertalanffy in 1930s. So Bertalanffy was actually a biologist. He developed the system theory in biological theory and later realized that his system theory can also be applied to other sciences including the social sciences. Okay? So he found that Ludwig Bertalanffy found that human body actually works like what? As a system where there are so many parts and each of these parts are interconnected to each other, and because they are getting interconnected to each other, they behave as one single unit. Although this single unit called system is greater than sum of its parts, even if I suppose attach all body parts of something, if I create all body parts and attach them, tell me, will it become live? Will it start living? No. Okay? Here what is happening, so these body parts have combined together to form such a something which is more than parts, sum of parts. So something unique has arisen, that is life. Okay? So definitely that is the basic idea of systems. And you know, every part of the system is interconnected to each other. That means suppose I am having some problem in my hand. Suppose I am having lots of pain in my hand. Now tell me, if I am having this problem, will my mind work properly? Okay, it is again started. अब दिख रहा है. Sometimes I think there is problem and internet बीच में it like connection is lost. Okay. So what I was saying, that suppose some part of my body is hurt and having lots of pain. Tell me, will my mind be able to work? Will my mind be working? Or will it be properly working? Working तो करेगा ही, otherwise if it not works then a person cannot be live. Very difficult that it would be efficiently working. It can happen in Hollywood, Bollywood movies में हो सकता है कि हीरो को इतनी सारी गोलियां वोलियां लग गई, but still his mind is so much good working and ultimately he creates wonders and etc etc. But in real life I really don't believe that it is going to work like that. Why? Because our body behaves as a system. If there is problem in one part of the system, other parts would not function properly. Okay? Like for example, take other things like, can I say India behaves as a system. So today suppose some people think that we'll become so much rich It should not be stuck here. Now there is no connection problem here. There was no problem from my side this time here. Internet is working fine from my side. Okay. So I was talking about, like, if you take India as a system, tell me, if suppose there are some people who think that we can become like very much rich by exploiting other people, by making other people very poor, and as a result part of the population is becoming poor, don't you think that ultimately there would be a time when they would also be affected? Yes or no? They would also be affected, because if more and more people are becoming poor, ultimately a time will come they would resort to unwanted means to sustain their livelihood, and yes, crimes etc. would be rising. So ultimately a time will come when people would be affected. So you now see, there were a number of things which were happening in our society, and ultimately people felt will not be affected because of that. Like today, you see, I'll give you one example. You think about some violations which are being done today in the name of development. Like you take the government's policy of genetically modified crops. Okay. During the UPA regime, government had a strict policy that GM crops would not be allowed in food crops. They can be used for others, but not in food crops. And theoretically, the policy continues. Practically, what has changed? Practically, silently, in fact, today we find that GM mustard has come and other GM crops are slowly creeping into the market. Now, why the policy was before the government had decided that we will not be going for the GM crops? Reason was simple, because government found that ultimately the research with respect to the GM crops is not sufficient enough to justify them. I still remember that time the issue was of this BT brinjal, and in this BT brinjal, in fact, ye Pusa, Delhi. Some of my friends were there in doing this research, and ultimately they told me that the BT brinjal, what they are giving, what the Monsanto is claiming is very, very bad variety actually. And there was so much pressure on them to show that BT brinjal varieties are very good. So उन्होंने क्या किया? They went to the market, they bought very big normal वो brinjal खरीद के लाए बड़े वाले, and they ultimately showed them that this is the cultivation which has come from the BT brinjal varieties. ठीक है? So ultimately this came to notice of people, these things, the violations which were being done, and government was forced to withdraw and ultimately frame this policy. But today this is the policy we are living in. It is very much discretionary policy today. Now, even if we think that such corruption in the system is not going to affect us, because probably we are isolated, we have a buffer. Can I say that there would be various other ways in which this corruption in the system will ultimately come back to us? It would maybe hurt us. Yes or no? Tell me. So, real worlds, if you talk about in real world, what we find there, the systems, the real phenomena work like a system. And these systems have some kind of defined boundaries within which the components of the system are interrelated to each other. Okay? And this idea of system, if you talk about, is starting from very, if you talk about large to very small things. Like for example, solar system is also a system. It works as a system. On the other hand, even an atom works like a system. Okay? So that is the basic conception of system analysis. So it was the work of Ludwig Bertalanffy which created this theory of systems. In human geography, the use of system analysis can be traced back to the works of positivistic geographers like Berry and Chorley. So during the quantitative revolution period, Chorley realized that system analysis tool can be very useful for human geographers as they tried to comprehend the complex human geographical systems. Okay? So that is the context of what is system analysis. Now let us see what essentially we are doing in this system analysis. So first thing we have to talk about is what is a system. What is a system? So system is a unit or a whole which is made up of several elements which are interrelated to each other in a meaningful relationship in such a manner that system works as a whole. Okay? So it is a whole made up of parts, where parts are interrelated to each other in a meaningful relationship. Consequences of this interrelationship is that the whole becomes larger, very important point, than the sum of its parts. And any change in one part of the system would be reflected in the other parts of the system as well. ठीक है, as well. ठीक है. So that is basically what we mean by a system. Now, if I talk about a model of a simple system with 4 components, suppose I talk about a system, and let us take a physical system. So a physical system, can I say, would have one part as lithosphere, other part as atmosphere, other part has as hydrosphere, and other part as biosphere. ठीक है. So what is happening with this? All these are interconnected to each other, and systems normally receive input from their environment, and depending upon that they produce output to their environment and thus affect the environment, and then are themselves affected by this change. ठीक है. So this is basically what, this is an example of a system. So you can take any example. For example, let us take that if today there is climate change taking place. If there is climate change taking place, will it affect this climate change? Will it affect the hydrosphere? Obviously, we know there would be melting of ice, sea level would be increasing, atmospheric moisture would be changing, etc., etc. Hydrological cycle would be changing. Will it affect biosphere? Obviously, it would affect. If there is change in precipitation, if there is change in temperature, will it not affect? Obviously, it would affect. Will this change, global warming, affect lithosphere directly? It would affect lithosphere directly. Will it affect indirectly through hydrosphere? In the coastal areas, there would be change. Sea level would be changing, that would also affect the lithosphere. Biosphere, if it is changing, again it would directly affect the lithosphere. So all these are what? These are all interconnected to each other. ठीक है. So this is what we essentially call it as a system. आगे देखते हैं. Geographical system क्या होते हैं? They are open natural systems. Open natural systems. Depending upon the type of geographical system, they can have various components. ठीक है. They can have variety of components. For example, if I am here, I am talking about a physical geography system. Can I say I could have talked about more a kind of human geography system, where I could have just taken human elements like cultural system, etc., etc. Okay. Even in that, actually, I would have to take some physical elements as well. ठीक है. Or I could have talked about here the anthroposphere. So depending upon which type of geographical analysis I am doing, the components of the system can change. ठीक है. But there would be always one thing, one component will always be common in all geographical systems. And what is that component? It is the component of space. It is the component of space. ठीक है. So if I am talking about here, The space component is what? It is the intervening factor. It is one component which is always there. So, for example, tell me, suppose I am talking about the same variables of these same variables. In two different areas, one is Congo and other is Amazon. In Congo forest and the Amazon forest region. So, we know Congo forest latitude and longitude is different. Here the latitude and longitude, that is the geographical space component, is what? Variable. Tell me yes or no. Do you understand what I am saying? So, here there is a different geographical system or geographical space. Here there is, in Congo, there is a different geographical space. As a result, tell me, can I say here the outcome is different, although the characteristics, physical characteristics are very similar. And here again we find that the outcome is different. ठीक है, outcome is different. Also, if I take into account other factors like not only space, according to some geographers, time is also one of the framework in which you view the phenomena. And any phenomena you talk about will always have variability of different space and time. As a result, what will happen? A different type of reality would be produced. Okay? A different type of reality would be produced. So, we will see that in case of the Amazon system, the rainforests which are there, different type of monkeys are found, new world monkeys for example. In Congo, there is presence of old world monkeys. One difference, for example, you might be aware, like in the Congo forest, you must be aware that there is presence of apes. While in the Amazon forest, there is absence of apes. Okay? So, one component which is always there in all geographical systems, I can choose. For example, suppose I am talking about a industrial system. Tell me, can I say I can neglect the physical factors? Yes or no? And I can mainly take into account factors like various other factors like labor, transportation, capital, market. Yes or no? So, depending upon the type of geographical system we are dealing with, we can change other components, but one component will always be there, that is the component of geographical space. बात समझ में आ गई? What is written here? And why different systems are different? Why they are becoming variable? Because that factor, this factor space will vary from place to place and this makes the variability. So, वो सारे फैक्टर्स, टेम्परेचर उतना ही है, रेनफॉल इज मोर और लेस सेम, ठीक है, ह्यूमिडिटी इज मोर और लेस सेम, all these factors are combining, then also we find that Amazon forests have different characteristics than Congo forests. ठीक है? So that is what essentially is the geographical systems. Okay. Now components of the system. We are first talking about system. What is a system? So first thing, each system is composed of number of things. One, set of elements having fixed characteristics or attributes. Having fixed characteristics or attributes. So first thing is set of elements which have fixed characteristics or attributes. Okay, it is fixed. Now, can you understand the significance of this term, fixed? Here fixed essentially has meant something which can be measured or quantified or described objectively. और डिस्क्राइब्ड ऑब्जेक्टिवली. ठीक है. सो कैन यू अंडरस्टैंड दिस टर्म फिक्स्ड का मतलब यहां पर क्या है? यस और नो? नाउ थिंक, later on we will be talking about the criticism of system analysis. And in the criticism of system analysis, we'll say that system analysis was criticized as being manifestation of positivism in geography. Manifestation of positivism in geography. Can you understand why it would have been criticized as manifestation of positivism in geography? Because very important feature of how system analysis has been used is that it focuses upon what? Very important element is this objectivity that is there. Okay? And again, as I said, elements can be different depending upon the purpose. Okay? So elements chosen can vary with purpose. So as we said, when we are studying industrial systems, what we were doing? We were essentially taking different elements. When we are studying, suppose ecosystem, we will be focusing upon different elements. So elements can vary except which element? Except there will always be element of geographical space. It will always provide it is always the intervening element. ठीक है. So that is the first thing, set of elements. Elements का मतलब क्या होता है? It is simply attributes, characteristics. Second, set of processes which are operating within a system. ठीक है. So what is happening? There are several processes which are also taking place within a system. And third is the interconnections between the elements. So what is happening? जैसे अभी हमने यहाँ पर एक सिस्टम की बात की. So tell me, can I say they were interconnected to each other through various processes? Yes or no? Like if I just take the example of atmosphere and hydrosphere. Are they connected with each other through process like hydrological cycle? Yes or no? They are connected to each other through hydrological cycle. Lithosphere, atmosphere, they are connected to each other through various processes like processes of denudation, whether it is weathering, mass wasting, erosion, transportation, deposition. ठीक है. So they are interconnected to each other through various processes. Same thing I can talk about lithosphere and biosphere. They are connected to each other through soil processes, edaphic processes. ठीक है. Again, we have seen that how hydrosphere and biosphere are connected through precipitation, etc. Variety of processes, they are interrelated with each other. Same thing, atmosphere, biosphere, temperature, precipitation, frost days, etc., etc. Various processes, they are interconnected to each other. Okay. So can you understand that what we essentially mean by a system? इतनी बात समझ में आ गई? Tell me fast. So that is one thing that we study about systems. Then systems का एक और बहुत important characteristics is that they are always surrounded by some kind of boundary. ठीक है? And on the basis of the boundaries and how they are interacting with their environment, systems can be of three types. There can be three types of systems. So first type of system is what we call it as the isolated systems. Isolated system is what? It is a fully closed system where there is no input and output taking place of both energy and matter. Both energy and matter. ठीक है? In reality, none of the natural systems or geographical systems can be said to be isolated. So it is basically what? It is a conceptual model. It is a conceptual model. Only we create isolated systems to do what? Okay, I will just tell you. Suppose there is here A, B and C. I have to understand the functioning of this system. Suppose मुझे इस सिस्टम की फंक्शनिंग को समझना है. Tell me, if I try to study it is as it is, will it not be difficult for me to understand this complex relationship between three variables? ठीक है. Now tell me, if I do one thing, that I first only take A and forget that A is getting affected by B and C, and I try to find out what are the variables which are present in A and how they are interconnected to each other within A. ठीक है. Then I do the same thing with B, same thing with C. So when I am theoretically assuming that A is not affected by the other things of its environment, this type of study is what? This type of system is what? It is an isolated system where there is no input of energy and matter taking place. There is no connection at all with the environment. But in reality, tell me, can there be any system which is not getting affected from the environment? There will always be. Even if we suppose think of sun, it is not, sun energy is coming out. ठीक है. So it is very difficult to imagine a such type of system which is fully isolated system. It is just what? It is a theoretical reality, not a practical reality. It is just a mental construct. Okay? So that is basically the case of isolated system. Isolated systems have their own utility. What is the utility of the isolated system? If I am suppose studying an isolated system, using the framework of an isolated system, what is the utility? कोई बता सकता है मुझे? Think. Can I say that main utility of an isolated system would be isolated systems help in creation of base models which can then be opened slowly, to understand how components would react to changes. Components would react to changes. I'll give you one example. We will later be studying von Thunen model of agricultural operations. एग्रीकल्चरल ऑपरेशंस नहीं है, रीजन्स और लैंड यूज पैटर्न. ठीक है. सो व्हाट वी विल सी दैट von Thunen मेक्स एन assumption based upon several assumptions. So one of the assumptions he makes is that the area under study is essentially what? An isolated agricultural estate. Isolated agricultural estate. So isolated agricultural estate है तो इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? It is not getting affected from outside the world. So he'll find that in this there is one market which is surrounded by agricultural field, and distance from the market, transportation cost, ultimately what it does, it defines how the agricultural operations are organized. ठीक है. So he will find that the first zone is the market gardening zone, dairy and market gardening. Then there is second zone, which is, he finds that, forestry zone. Then he finds that there are three zones which are about grain farming. Grain farming, three zones are there. And ultimately he finds that outside this is the livestock and ranching. ठीक है. So देखो उसने क्या किया, by making an assumption that it is an isolated agricultural estate, first he was able to find that how a ideal system, an ideal pattern would be found if only there is one market. Can you understand? Tell me. And then he slowly, what he does, he relaxes these assumptions one by one, and he introduces two changes. And he introduces two changes. One change he introduces is, in the initial one, what was the case? In the initial one, only one type of transportation system was there, that is the bullock cart. Now there is another type of transportation system which is river. And he also assumes that there is a secondary market is also present. And thus what he finds, that now the pattern undergo a shift. So a more complex type of model emerges, बाद में इसको देखेंगे डिटेल में. But can you understand what is the basic purpose of making an isolated system, studying these isolated systems? And such type of isolated system studies are very popular, have been very popular in various fields of human geography like economic geography, like very popular in population geography, so here what they do when they are formulating the population pyramids, the cohorts which are formulated, population pyramid, you know, the age and sex pyramid that we talked about, male, female. So the cohorts are initially based upon isolation, that other factors are not impacting. Then we see that suppose we also relax fertility factor, we also relax mortality factor, we relax other factors, then how it would evolve. Okay, so can you understand now isolated systems? Tell me fast. So that is basically the case of isolated systems. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Second is closed systems. Closed system is also a kind of isolated system, but it is comparatively more open. So they have defined boundaries, and across these boundaries the exchange of energy is possible. केवल क्या हो रहा है? There is possibility of exchange of energy, but not that of matter. Matter cannot be exchanged. ठीक है. For example, if you talk about Earth, can be conceived as a type of closed system. ठीक है. At least in the short run, it is behaving as a closed system. There is input and output of energy in the Earth system, but gravity does not allow the matter to escape from this Earth system. ठीक है. Gravity is not allowing the matter to escape from this Earth system. So it is behaving as what? It is behaving as a closed system. But in reality, it is also not a closed system. So in reality, we will be finding that none of the natural systems would be closed system. In fact, if you talk about Earth system, tell me, can I say even Earth is not a closed system? Tell me, is there regular fall of cosmic dust? Regular fall of cosmic dust taking place in the Earth system? होता है कि नहीं? It is taking place 24 hours. And what about occasionally meteorites coming in and hitting the Earth's surface? So it is also not a perfect example of a closed system. ठीक है, one example of closed system if I talk about, बाद में हम जो use करने वाले हैं. So in geomorphology we will see that W.M. Davis in his concept of geographical or normal cycle of erosion theory. Cycle of erosion, what he has done? He has not used, देखो ये कहना कि he has used closed system is wrong, is a example of closed system. We can say, we can use closed system to understand W.M. Davis perspective, because जब W.M. Davis ने अपना theory बनाया था, that time there was no system analysis, तब system concept ही नहीं exist करता था. It was only in 1930s when Bertalanffy ultimately created the concept of systems. But to understand what is closed system, we can use the conception used by W.M. Davis. So tell me, we'll see later on that Davis says that a landform is experiencing a rapid upliftment, a short-lived rapid upliftment, ठीक है, which ultimately stops, and as it ultimately stops, फिर क्या होता है? Then the cycle of erosion starts. ठीक है, very importantly he assumes that during the operation, एक assumption वो करता है, this is his assumption, during the operation of the cycle, base level remains constant. ठीक है, बेस लेवल क्या होता है? इट इज द सी लेवल. सो बेस लेवल remains constant. Now tell me, how base level can change? Can I say base level can change either when sea level changes, either rises or falls, or there is upliftment or subsidence of land? दोनों में base level change हो जाएगा? Yes or no? If there is tectonic upliftment or subsidence of land taking place, then also base level will be, sea level will be changing, and if sea level is changing, then the base level would be changing. Whatever be the case, tell me, if I take this as the base point, if there is change in base level, the amount of matter that is available here, this is the matter. If there is change in base level, will the amount of matter also change? which is subjected to the cycle of erosion process. Yes or no? अगर सी लेवल फॉल हुआ या लैंडफॉर्म अपलिफ्ट हुआ, in both the cases what will happen? There would be addition of matter. There would be addition of matter. If sea level is rising or the landform is subsiding, then there is subtraction of matter. Reduction of matter is taking place. ठीक है? So practically speaking, when Davis assumes that during the operation of the cycle base level remains constant, tell me, isn't he formulating a kind of closed system model? बताओ मुझे, isn't he kind of formulating a closed system model where there is no input or output of matter? Energy level change हो सकता है. How energy level would be changing? Suppose this is the case. So how this ultimately evolves? Rivers would cut their V-shaped valleys. Rivers would be cutting their V-shaped valleys, and ultimately, like this, the landform would be reduced, and this type of flat surface, this last surface which I am showing here, this type of flat surface would be the end product of this erosion process. This flat surface is what we call it as the peneplain. ठीक है? Peneplain. So tell me, when it was in the early stage, so he says that cycle always passes from youth to here, mature, and ultimately to old stage. So this is the sequence through which the cycle is passing through. So tell me, when the cycle was in youth stage, was it having more potential energy? Was it higher, and thus was it having more potential energy? As the landform continued to reduce in elevation, what happened to the amount of energy available? Amount of energy reduced. ठीक है? So can you see in this system that in this system the energy levels, the energy is changing. ठीक है? There is input and output of energy but not of matter. So such type of system is an example of what? It is an example of a closed system. So बात समझ में आ गई? What is isolated system and what is a closed system? दोनों के बीच में डिफरेंस समझ में आ गया होगा. Although they are both what? They both are very theoretical concept. In real world, all the systems we know are essentially what? They are natural systems. ठीक है? And third type of system is open systems. All natural systems are open systems, including the geographical systems. Open systems are interconnected with the environment in such a manner that there is continuous exchange of matter as well as energy. Matter as well as energy. Most of the open systems have feedback relation with the environment, due to which they are able to continuously adjust with respect to the changes in the environment which are taking place. ठीक है? They are able to adjust according to the changes which are taking place in the environment. So, what we are saying that no system would be a closed or isolated system in reality. So, any system is what? It has this always, a system will always have boundaries, but it would be taking input from the environment and producing output to the environment, and in turn would ultimately, this is basically what, this is the environment and this is the system. Okay. So, always there would be input and output of both energy and matter always taking place, and because they have a feedback relationship with the environment, they are able to adjust. Okay. Otherwise, what will happen? If a system is unable to adjust according to the environment, what will happen with the system? Can I say it would decay and ultimately die with time? Yes or no? Will it ultimately decay and die with time if it is unable to adjust according to the changes which are happening in the environment? Okay. So, every system we think of in the world, it is what? It is essentially a open system. कोई भी system, whether it is a family system, that is, whether it is a political system, whether it is an economic system, whether it is ecosystem, whether it is landforms, ठीक है, whether it is landforms, all of these have what? All of these are open system. Any system you take, atmospheric system, oceanic system, all of these are open systems where there is constant input and output of energy taking place. थोड़ा सा दिमाग लगाओ कुमकुम. I have here made, if you look into this, I am clearly making it dotted lines. And dotted lines का मतलब क्या होता है? That there are entry points. If I don't make boundary, then how you can call it as a system? There must be something which would separate it from the other systems or from the environment. ठीक है? So, such type of systems or all natural systems, geographical systems are essentially open systems. Although, however, to understand them step by step, to simplify the process of understanding, we can first go for isolated or closed system, and then what we can do, then we can ultimately try to understand the changes that would be happening in each of the variables if we open the system. ठीक है, बात समझ में आ गई? Now, depending upon how the system is related with its environment, ठीक है, so on the basis of relationship of the system, abhi nahi, we'll talk about that when we'll finish this topic. Feedback mechanism is of two types. One, there is positive feedback mechanism, and second, there is a negative feedback mechanism. ठीक है. So, let us see some positive feedback mechanism. When change in element, one element of the system affects the environment in such a manner that it leads to further changes in the system in the same direction, It is referred to as the positive feedback mechanism. Already हमने इसको देखा है, positive feedback mechanism. If you remember, we talked about that global warming. So how global warming will trigger the melting of polar ice, which in turn would do what? It would reduce the albedo of the earth, which in turn would accelerate the process of warming. Okay. So this type of change is what? This type of change is a positive feedback mechanism. एक population human geography का example लेते हैं. Population theory of Marx is also based upon this same positive feedback mechanism. So Marx क्या कहता है कि there is in a society, in a capitalistic society, there are two classes of people. One is the rich or the capitalist class. Other is the poor, or we can simply say the labor class. So rich have capital. What they do? They invest this capital. They ultimately, through this investment of capital, what they do? They make profit. They make profit, and thus what they do? They increase their capital, and this further will do what? It would further investment, the process goes on. On the other hand, what will be happening with labor? Labor has only one resource, that is, what resource labor has? Labor has only labor resource. Labor as a resource. So in them what will happen? Population growth rate high. You might have heard about this kind of saying that in poor families, people will think that if there are more number of people, then they would be getting more salary, more income would be coming into the house. So they would have higher population growth rate. Okay. So higher population growth rate would mean what? Can I say? With this, what will happen? Supply of labor would become higher than the demand of labor, and this would essentially mean what? Reduction in wages, and this would mean greater poverty, and greater poverty means what? Even more higher population growth rate. Can you understand the cycle, how it will be working? Here this person was a capitalist, investing, making profit by giving lower wages to the workers, keeping most of the profit, and thus he was increasing the capital. So tell me, in this what is happening? Can we say that with time the gap which was there between rich and poor, is this gap increasing with time? Is it self-perpetuating kind of system? Yes or no? ठीक है. सो बाद में देखेंगे मार्क्स का थ्योरी इज ऑफ दिस हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म इज समथिंग लाइक दिस. He talks about that initially there was a kind of primitive communism. So society based on communal principles, community principles. So there was equality, but the king ultimately changed. In Europe, this theory is based upon the case of Europe. So king changed the systems, and there was in fact what started? Feudalism. सो यू नो फ्यूडलिज्म में क्या हुआ, सम पीपल वर गिवन लैंड ओनरशिप while others became the laborers, agricultural laborers. So what will happen with rich and poor gap? It would keep on increasing. Later on, you will be finding that these same people who were the feudal landlords, they had the capital. With industrial revolution, they also became the capitalists. So this was where the capitalism started. So with capitalism, what will happen? Further, the gap between rich and poor would ultimately keep on increasing. And later हम देखेंगे, Marx says that it would reach to so much high level that people will ultimately revolt. So there would be a revolt. And after revolt, ultimately what will happen? A communist society would again be created. It is his conception of modern communism would be started. So इसी को कहते हैं historical materialism. So theory of historical materialism, this was based upon the experience which was seen in case of Europe. ठीक है. So however here मैं इसमें थोड़ा सा drift हो गया, but can you understand how this capitalistic society is in this capitalistic society there is a positive feedback mechanism which keeps on increasing the gap between rich and poor. ठीक है. So that is what we call it as the positive feedback mechanism. Okay. Then comes the negative feedback mechanism. It refers to a relationship where the changes in the environment cause such changes in the system which tries to limit the impact of changes in the environment. ठीक है. So it would try to always do what? Reduce the amount of change which is taking place. Such type of feedback mechanism is referred to as the negative feedback mechanism. So examples, physical geography में slow thermohaline circulation. There is a slow thermohaline circulation. So will not expose the deep carbon dioxide to the surface at faster rate. Thus, it would help reduce the greenhouse gas reduction in the rate of global warming. ठीक है. या CO2 का एग्जाम्पल ले सकते हो, और I have talked about others, like for example, suppose there is more humidity, more temperature. Suppose there is increase in temperature. So increase in temperature, can it mean that there would be greater humidity? Yes or no? Will the humidity increase? If humidity is increasing, what will happen with the cloud cover? Tell me fast. What will happen with the cloud cover? Will it also increase? And if the cloud cover is increasing, what will be the impact on the albedo? It would also increase. And if the albedo is increasing, what will be the impact on the insolation received? It would reduce. And thus, it would try to reduce global warming. Okay. So this is an example of what? A negative feedback mechanism. If we take one example of human geography, increased migration into the cities causes increase in the cost of living, traffic congestions, environmental problems, so many type of problems, etc., restricting the in-migration and initiating the process of counter-urbanization. Counter-urbanization is when people are migrating away from the city to either smaller towns or villages. ठीक है. So this phenomena of counter-migration is what? It is an example of a negative feedback mechanism. बात समझ में आ गई? Tell me. The phenomena through which the system tries to restrict the changes or impact of the environmental change is referred to as the homeostasis mechanism. ठीक है. So this regulatory mechanism is basically what? It is homeostasis mechanism. As a result of this homeostasis mechanism, the natural systems are able to maintain a state of dynamic equilibrium. They would be able to remain in a kind of equilibrium state, in a dynamic equilibrium state. ठीक है, ये बात समझ में आ गई. Tell me fast so that we can further move on. Now, on the basis of the components and interactions with the system can be categorized into morphological, cascading and process response system. ठीक है. Actually, these are three stages. I would say that these are three stages of system analysis. So in system analysis, we go from where? We go from simplification. Phases, sorry. ठीक है. Thank you. We go from simplification towards complexity. We go from simplification towards complexity. ठीक है. So that is basically the case of these three. Weber is asking homeostasis. अभी मैंने बताया homeostasis is a mechanism, a regulation mechanism. Like we said, negative feedback वाला ये जो examples थे, we were talking about the homeostasis mechanisms. So out migration, counter urbanization here becomes the homeostasis mechanism. ठीक है. In that case, all these processes, they were leading to what? A kind of homeostasis mechanism. ठीक है. टेक अनदर एग्जाम्पल, एक और एग्जाम्पल देता हूं. सपोज देयर इज एन इकोसिस्टम एंड द पॉपुलेशन कीप्स ऑन इंक्रीजिंग इन एन इकोसिस्टम. ठीक है. एंड अल्टीमेटली दिस इज हाउएवर द कैरिंग कैपेसिटी ऑफ द सिस्टम. Suppose the population keeps on increasing, ultimately can I say it would reach to a level where it cannot sustain, the ecosystem carrying capacity has been breached. As soon as it has been breached, what will happen? Can I say here there would be lots of limitations which would be applied in the form of hunger, etc., etc., diseases. And what will happen with the population then? Will the population reduce or increase? I am asking to you, Weber. Will the population reduce or increase? Or other people also you can tell. Tell me fast. We will in fact see this. This is the basis of Malthusian theory of population. So Malthus says that environment has a carrying capacity. So population grows to such a level that ultimately there would be reduction in population. So he calls this as positive checks. Positive checks. These positive checks can be many things like poverty, unemployment, famines, epidemics and pandemics. अभी देख सकते हो, ठीक है. Even man-made things like wars, etc. So tell me, can I say this positive check is an example of homeostasis mechanism which would not allow the population to go beyond a certain point? Yes or no? I hope कि समझ में आ गया होगा what is homeostasis. So it is that part which is regulating. ठीक है. Okay. So coming to this part, on the basis of yes, positive mechanism नहीं होता है बेटा, पॉजिटिव फीडबैक मैकेनिज्म. पूरा लिखो. पॉजिटिव फीडबैक मैकेनिज्म would accelerate the same change in the same direction, while negative feedback mechanism will always be keeping in limit. Okay. So on the basis of the components and interaction, these are in fact जो हम बात करने जा रहे हैं, these are the 3 phases of system analysis, because what is the main purpose of system analysis is to simplify the reality. ठीक है. Simplification of the reality. So these 3 stages are, we can say these 3 phases are the steps. These are 3 steps of system analysis. यहाँ पर मैं phases के बजाय if I use another word, that is, it would be even better, and I can say that these are 3 steps of system analysis. ठीक है. So first is the morphological system, second is the cascading system, and third is the process response system. अब देखते हैं इसको. So I'll take two examples of each, one physical geography and other human geography example. So here will be physical geography and human geography. ठीक है. Now if I talk first about physical geography, let us take the example of a slope. So first I am talking about morphological system. A morphological system. ठीक है. So what we essentially do in a morphological system is we identify the elements of the system. We define, describe, and what we describe about the elements of the system. What we describe about the elements of the system? Anyone? Can I say we are essentially describing fixed attributes or properties, characteristics of the elements of the system? Fixed word मैं सुनना चाहता था. Only one person is saying here that is Nitin. All other यहाँ liquid, gas, solid कर रहा है. So morphological systems. Okay, so tell me, if I take an example of suppose a slope, mountains में गए होगे, तो you might have seen that slopes look something like this. Yes or no? ठीक है. In fact, here is the debris which is lying, the material which broke down from above. So it is something like this. So what we find, there is 4 parts of this slope. So here हमने slope में क्या किया, identify किया, there are 4 elements of this slope. One, this upper part is referred to as, बाद में भी देखेंगे, it is referred to as the summital convexity. This very steep slope is what we call it as the free face. This debris slope is what we call it as the rectilinear slope element, and this a little bit concave type of lower slope, it is referred to as basal concavity. Basal concavity. बात समझ में आई? What is a morphological system? So in morphological systems, what we do first, it is first level of analysis where we are identifying the main elements of the system. So you see here, there are natural systems where first level of analysis is done, that is elements of the system are identified and their properties are described. ठीक है? So that is morphological system. अगर हम example यहाँ पर लें, human geography में here we were talking about a slope system. In morphological system, human geography example, let us again take that example of Marx capitalistic system. So in the capitalistic system, he identified 2 main elements of the system. What are the 2 main elements of the system? One is the rich class, other is the poor class. Rich is the capitalist class, while poor is the labor class. ठीक है? So that is this. Now once we have done that, next step is the step of cascading systems. Cascading systems. So cascading systems में what we do? We identify the processes which are operating. Identify the main processes which are operating. So processes are mainly identified and their relationship are identified in the cascading systems. So slope वाले में आके देखते हैं how they are identified. So see, so in this upper part, what is taking place? In the upper part, this summit part, there is convex element which is found. So this convexity is result of mainly chemical weathering and soil creep. ठीक है? Here if you talk about, it is weathering and fall of material. Here it is essentially, here there is collection. I am not talking about deposition, I am not using the word deposition because बाद में देखेंगे deposition is always done by some agent. ठीक है, so at best you can say collection and deposition, plus here there is weathering and wash is also taking place. ये सारी चीज़ें हो रही हैं यहाँ पर debris slope में. And this basal concavity there is phenomena of weathering and wash. Weathering and wash. ठीक है. So you can understand, ऊपर से यहाँ से material is getting removed from here. Material is getting removed. It is getting collected and deposited where? At the footil. Here also it is suffering weathering and wash. And you see mainly यहाँ पर ज़्यादा क्या हो रहा है? Weathering and wash in this lower part. And thus can you see here there is very thin sedimentary cover, debris cover. But यहाँ पर debris cover is greater at the footil. ठीक है. So second level पर मैंने क्या किया? I identified the major processes. Here in this human system में देखें तो if I take the example of again the Marx, so what are the processes which are interlinking them? Processes which are interlinking them is, can I say, investment of capital? Yes or no? Investment of capital, wage rates, profits, population, growth rate. These are the processes which are interlinking them. Are you able to appreciate what I am saying here? Tell me fast. So what I did here, first मैंने components को identify किया, फिर मैंने processes को identify किया, and now I am going to get a complete picture. ठीक है. So it is something like you experience, you engineers must have experienced this, many of you. So you know, you people are engineers, and most of the people in the family think that if you are an engineer, you are in a position to solve any problem arising in all the electronic equipments or electrical equipments that you must be having at home. So definitely घर वालों को अगर उनके सामने solve नहीं कर पाए, then there would be a kind of crisis of identity भी आ जाएगा, and people will think कि यार ये कैसा engineer है. You must have faced that situation. So if you ultimately face this kind of situation, what you do? Suppose तुमको दे दिया कि ये लो ये टेप रिकॉर्डर बना दो या रेडियो बना दो या other things like do this or that, और टीवी खराब हो गया, whatever, or fridge. So what you will do? First of all, क्योंकि औकात इंडिया की इंजीनियरिंग is only in books, we know very well. So हमें भी पता है कि what we have done in our engineering classes औकात के बाहर की चीज़ है, but still what we will do, first we will try to understand the parts, कौन कौन से parts हैं, and then we'll look into okay how it is interconnected to each other, and then what I will do, I will make a mental picture of how that system works, and accordingly I will try to solve the problem. ठीक है. Yes, YouTube manual. if you look into any of these YouTube manuals, they will explain it in the same manner. They'll tell you that this part is this is that part. First they will explain you about the part, they will explain you simultaneously what function it performs, and then they will link that. Okay, so if you any of you have seen that YouTube manual, that is what they are doing here. There is system analysis. Okay, unfortunately I am not an engineer. I was so much pressurized from my family to become an engineer, but I preferred to be not an engineer. Okay. Then if you talk about, last is the process response system. You will be very much surprised. In fact, after completing my intermediate classes, which was through physics, chemistry, maths, PCM was my branch, I did BCom. And what was the reason for ultimately going to BCom? The reason was because most of my friends were going to do BCom. सारा का सारा मेरा group, क्योंकि I was always throughout in some naughty boys company, so सब के सब they were going to just ultimately opt for BCom. And किसी के भी उनमें से किसी के भी marks ठीक नहीं थे. Some of them already had the BCom stream. Yes, peer pressure was very strong, so I also opted for commerce. So it was like this. I don't regret that because it has added to my personality. It had made me more, I would say, multi-dimensional, because I very well understand economics. I now very well understand other aspects, the human aspects of life. So again, it is like this. Okay, process response system. So what is basically the process response system? अब यहाँ पर देखो, if it is something like this happening, tell me, can I say if there is reduction taking place like this, it would be something like this taking place. So this phenomena हम इसको बाद में बोलेंगे. This is referred to as parallel retreat of the slope. Parallel retreat of the slope. So can you see, with parallel retreat of the slope, what is taking place? This free face upper element, which is steeper element, is getting reduced in size. Can you see? And this lowermost gentle element is ultimately getting what? It is extending. Final, it would be becoming like this. So that basal concavity from both the sides, it would merge, and this kind of flat surface would be formed. बाद में देखेंगे, we'll call this type of surface as, in fact इसको मैं बना के दिखा देता हूँ, a multi-concave surface would be formed like this. This type of multi-concave surface would be called as pediplane. So initially it was like this. So parallel retreat of the slopes occurred, and this type of flat surface would be formed. So can you understand मैंने क्या किया? पहले parts को पढ़ा, then processes, then I found out that how this system would be operating. Can we get this? पूरी तरह से नहीं समझ में आएगा till we study the slope development process, but overall कुछ the basic idea I think you should have got. You will not understand this whole process. But I am just trying to explain what is a process response system, where I connect components and processes and how they are interlinked with each other, how they are working together. ठीक है, सेम थिंग हियर इन केस ऑफ मार्क्स. अभी मैंने एक्सप्लेन किया था थ्योरी ऑफ मार्क्स. So theory, he explains how they are becoming more profitable and others are becoming more poor, and he explains that this is how the historical materialism works. He reaches to a conclusion of historical materialism. So this is basically what? This is essentially your process response system. तो ये तीनों वर्ड समझ में आ गए होंगे. एंड कैन यू ऑल्सो अंडरस्टैंड, सपोज अगर मैं क्वेश्चन पूछता हूं, एडवांटेजेस ऑफ सिस्टम एनालिसिस. एडवांटेजेस ऑफ सिस्टम एनालिसिस. सो टेल मी व्हाट वुड बी वन ऑफ द एडवांटेजेस ऑफ सिस्टम एनालिसिस और प्रॉस ऑफ सिस्टम एनालिसिस. कोई बता सकता है मुझे? Can I say that it helps in simplification of complex reality? Yes or no? It helps in simplification of complex reality. Now, अगर मैं एग्जाम में only if I write this much and if I do not elaborate this, will I get marks? Will I get marks? Very difficult that I will be getting marks. ठीक है. So suppose I have to elaborate this. Can I now elaborate that how in morphological system? First step is the morphological system step. Second step is the cascading system step, and third step is what? Process response system. बात समझ में आ गई? Okay. So process response system, it is a hybrid or combination of morphological and cascading system, whereby the operating processes determine the morphological characteristics of the system. All process response systems have the capacity to self-regulate. That means all of them are mostly natural systems. Then systems, another step of understanding the various type of systems is on the basis of type of interrelationships which exist. ठीक है. So various type of interrelationships can exist in reality. So let us talk about those interrelationships. First is the case of series relationship. Series relationship, and here when we are talking about relationship is between whom? Between the elements of a system. Between the elements of a system. So series relationship, it is the simplest relationship whereby elements are interconnected by an irreversible link. it may be observed as simple cause-effect relationship. So someone was saying that it helps. Amit was saying cause-effect can be understood easier way. You have to understand, Amit, cause-effect is just one step of understanding the reality. Reality is more complex. Not always it is cause-effect. In fact, cause-effect is so much complex that it would be difficult to sometimes understand what is cause and what is effect. Okay? So it may be observed as simple cause-effect relation where there is no mechanism of feedback. ठीक है? So यहाँ पर भी देखो हम कैसे जा रहे हैं, one by one step. So there is no mechanism of feedback. In nature, such relationships seldom exist. ठीक है? So if I talk about examples, philosophy of determinism is based upon what? Such simple cause-effect relationship. And the idea of determinism was very much related with, based on this kind of series relationship. Okay? It was based upon this series kind of relationship. So, for example, if you talk about let us see some kind of climatic determinism. So, if there is a, suppose a climate which is a humid climate, so in this humid climate, tell me, can I say such humid climate allows cropping to be done by people? Okay. So it would give rise to what? Can I say it would give rise to agrarian society? Yes or no? Tell me. Will it give rise to agrarian society? बिल्कुल देगा. It would give rise to agrarian society. So this is, here we are talking about what? Simple determinism. ठीक है? Environmental determinism. And this agrarian society is, does this agrarian society is affecting the humid climate? बताओ मुझे. Is it affecting the humid climate? Your comments have stopped यार, कहाँ पे गायब हो गए तुम लोग? एनवायरमेंटल डिटर्मिनिज्म में ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. ठीक है? In environmental determinism, this is not possible. If we are talking about possibilism, there is a feedback mechanism. ठीक है? In environmental determinism, there is no feedback mechanism. Human beings have no role to play. ठीक है? So that is why we are saying it is an example of such kind of series relationship. एक physical system से देखें तो you see, sun affects the planets and planets are affecting the satellites. Tell me, can planets, do they have much effect on sun? No. And do satellites have much effect on the planets? No. So again, this is what? One way relationship. So that is basically an example, another example of a series relationship. ठीक है? As I said, in reality, such relationships are difficult to find. Such relationships are more theoretical. ठीक है? Second is parallel relationship. So देखो, सीरीज के लिए डायग्राम बनाना है तो you make the diagram like this. So there is an A which is affecting B, and which in turn affects C, can affect C, but there is no feedback in this. ठीक है? So this is example of series relationship. Then if we talk about an example of a parallel relation, there is A, there is B, and there is C. So can you see that here there is what? This is an example of a parallel relationship. सर्किट्स पढ़ा होगा सबने यार, सीरीज सर्किट, पैरेलल सर्किट. So that is basically what? That is an example of a parallel relationship. So when two or more elements affect or are affected by a third, or when one element affects two or more elements but with no feedback mechanism, it is referred to as the parallel relationship. For example, if you talk about impact of precipitation and temperature in the agricultural field, so we know that if अगर हम यहाँ पर देखें तो this is an example, और एक और बना देता हूँ, there is B and there is C, and both are in fact affecting D. ठीक है? So this is another form of parallel. So अगर मैं यहाँ पर बात करूँ parallel relationship, so suppose this is temperature and this is, if you talk about precipitation. So temperature and precipitation affecting anything like we can say agriculture. They are affecting agriculture. ठीक है? Human geography में भी we can think of, like for example, there is suppose social laws. If you talk about economic laws, social systems and economic systems. Together, can we say that they have led to creation of and class differences in the society? Yes or no? Although there can be an argument where we can say that how social systems or economic systems are interrelated to each other. इसमें मैं और भी जोड़ सकता हूँ. Like tell me, can I add here another parallel, that is environmental characteristics, political regime. Yes or no? ठीक है. So this is an example of a relationship which is a kind of parallel relationship. But again we are saying here what? It is more theoretical. It is highly theoretical, because again it is very difficult that they would not be interrelated with each other. They are all interrelated with each other. Again there is a feedback mechanism which goes on. So even if you talk about, it is difficult to find such kind of mechanical relationship. इस तरह का mechanical relationship again exists wherever there is no feedback mechanism. Such type of mechanical relationships we find only in environmental determinism or deterministic philosophies. ठीक है, we are finding in deterministic philosophies such type of relationships. Then feedback relationship, feedback के मैंने already बहुत सारे example दिए हैं. So when one element influences the surrounding element and the element itself is affected by the surrounding elements, such a relationship is referred to as the feedback relationship. We have already seen that there can be positive and negative feedback mechanisms. ठीक है. So if you talk about, suppose feedback का मैं एक छोटा सा example दूं. There is A, there is B. Or just कुछ पहले simplify करके let us see. There is A, there is B. A is affecting B, but B in turn is affecting A. So this is basically what? This is an example of a feedback relationship. For example, tell me, there is, suppose I take A as precipitation and B suppose I take as vegetation. So if there is A is affecting B. Once there is vegetation, tell me, vegetation, say, is there phenomena of evapotranspiration? Evapotranspiration leads to what? It leads to greater humidity, and greater humidity means what? Greater precipitation. So this is an example of what? Feedback relationship. So in real world, most of the relations are dialectic in nature. Dialectic का मतलब क्या होता है? Both are two ways, and that is one of the basic understanding. You can understand that why environmental determinism was so much criticized, because most of the relationships are more complex than science or environmental determinism recognize. ठीक है. So this is basically the case of feedback mechanism. And then there is fourth, simple compound सिंपल कंपाउंड रिलेशनशिप, ठीक है। या फिर इसका और एग्जांपल लेना है तो यू नो वेरी वेल, लाइक हियर environmental characteristics. Tell me, are environmental characteristics giving rise to social customs, social and cultural characteristics? Yes. There is a relationship. इन सब में आपस में क्या है? There is a feedback type of relationship, and these class differences in turn affect each of these. इन सबको अफेक्ट करता है, ठीक है। ओके, सिंपल कंपाउंड रिलेशनशिप, इट इनकॉर्पोरेट्स बोथ सीरीज एंड पैरेलल रिलेशनशिप्स but with no feedback mechanisms. This is a complex situation where interaction becomes too numerous and are difficult to analyze. ठीक है, so इसमें there is no feedback, so it is simple compound ठीक है। So can you see, this is a simple compound. Many relationships here we can talk about, like for example there is A B X, there is A B Y, similarly you can see A C R ACS. So this is what, now here just we are taking few elements and you can see that 4 series we can find in them, 4 type of series we can find in them. So this type of is what, it is simple compound relationship. Now if I suppose इसको मुझे compound बनाना है, complex compound, complex compound relationship, can I say that here they would be interacting with each other? This type of relationship becomes what? It becomes complex compound relationship. ठीक है, so in real world we will be finding that there exists what? There exists a complex compound relationship. For example, अभी हमने बात की थी सोसाइटी की. So let us see how society is a so much complex compound system. ठीक है, so we are saying that environmental settings have given rise to, first if you talk about the class difference आया उसकी वजह से. So how we know that agriculturalists, they were more rich and those which were in the areas, जो humid areas के लोग थे, they became agriculturalists. There were pastoralists in the drier regions. So there was difference in the amount of food they can produce. So there was, suppose this led to the class differences which came, or good agricultural field near the river, etc. They were occupied by certain people, so they became more rich. So this class difference, this ultimately it gives to economic differences. Yes or no? और इसको मैं थोड़ा सा और डिफाइन करता हूँ. एक ही हम विलेज की बात करते हैं सपोज. चलो, सो क्लास डिफरेंसेस. वन, मोर फर्टाइल लैंड. And less fertile land. So this became the rich farmer and this became the poor farmer. ठीक है. So can I say this has led to what? Economic differences. It has led to economic differences. And this economic difference, tell me, is it perpetuating the class difference? Isn't it perpetuating the class difference? It is definitely perpetuating the class difference. Now, this class difference is also manifested in number of other things, like for example, the political settings. Political regime maybe. So tell me, if there is a political regime, can I say there would be some ये क्या हो रहा है, undemocratic and more authoritative regime would be present. ठीक है. So again, this authoritative regime would lead to more economic differences. It would ultimately, these class differences would cause more environmental changes in the favor of the rich farmers. Okay. So a society becomes what? A social system is a very complex compound type of system which is existing. So many number of variables are present that it would ultimately, as we keep on going, it would become more and more difficult for us to understand all the components of the relationship. ठीक है. So in reality, what we find that most of the relationships are complex compound relationships. ठीक है. In open systems, in geographical systems, majority of them are the complex compound relationship. आज का ही system देख लो. You talk about today's system. In India, we find that there is Varna system. And can you see how much it is like complex, so much complex. Otherwise, how you can justify, how you can explain that a very educated person, so much educated persons are supporting such kind of brutalities which are taking place, which are totally unobjective, which are totally beyond facts, beyond reality. Still they have been deluded to so much levels that they ultimately are accepting many of the things, they are justifying, they are supporting all such changes which are taking place. Again, if you look into these, you'll have to go back to the social system, the caste system. And again, in the caste, you will be finding that it would be tied with the economic system. Okay? So, the dominance of a particular caste historically has, we see that it has been like historically magnified by the environmental settings. These classes have always had better fertile lands, always have had access to these better lands. These classes, if you talk about, they have always had historically the political system in their favor, the social system in their favor, and again it has magnified their economic status. If they have money, they can again do many other things. They can convince with money several other people to be in their favor, to be standing with them. So again, see what is happening. All these are so much interconnected. How you are going to separate? We talk about cow terrorism. So cow terrorism जो आज के डेट में हम बोलते हैं, what is that cow terrorism? Okay, you can say that it is tied with religion, that it is hurting belief of some people. Then why those people, most of the, if you talk about the cattle cutting factories which are there, they are mostly owned by the same Hindu people, most of them. Why it has happened that during this same period, India has become the largest exporter of beef in the world? So how can you actually isolate a cultural system from an economic system? It is very, very difficult. And you can see how much intricately the political system is in between them, these two. Okay, so in real world, we will be finding that most of the relationships, they would be found to be complex compound relationships. And can you understand now the criticism of देखो एक आ गया यहाँ पे मुरारी कुमार, अब ये मुझसे पूछ रहा है एनी व्यू अबाउट इस्लामिक टेररिज्म. We'll come about that, Murari, don't worry. I will be talking about that in the religious geography. It is not far away. But this is pathetic. Really, it is very pathetic, the type of question you are asking. And this is, see, I was talking about this type of educated people. Okay. And what I am explaining is very, very logical explanation. I really believe that I am more Hindu than many of the Hindus today which they are talking about. Okay, leave it. We will not make this a political debate. I am just explaining how so many things are interconnected to each other. Okay? So, if you talk about, this is what we actually find. In real world, there is a very, very, if you talk about complexity. And can you understand now why possibilism was so much critical of environmental determinism? Can you get this idea? Why possibilism was so much critical of environmental determinism? And later we will see humanism. We'll see why humanism was so much critical of quantitative revolution. Can you understand this? In fact, we will see, बाद में इसी चीज को देखेंगे, that QR was basically what? It was just focusing upon economic factors affecting human activities. Similarly, we will see behavioral approach. it was here psychological factors. Its major focus was on how psychological factors affect human activities or explain the geographical phenomena. Similarly, humanism approach, we will see, was talking about how social factors, social or more importantly cultural, social actually ज़्यादा बड़ा word है, so cultural factors are affecting the human activities. So in सबका criticism आया and all these criticisms were criticized in the structuralist or radical approach. So structuralist or radical approach says that how you can isolate them. In reality, what actually happens, there is a environmental settings, there is presence of cultural settings, there is presence of economic settings, there is presence of क्या बचा, political settings, there is psychological settings. Now tell me, can I say that in reality, can we actually separate this from each other? Is it possible? Today, what is my psychology? Can I say, has it not come from the environment I have been living, the cultural setting I have been living in, economic settings which have affected me, political settings which have affected me? Okay. So later we will see this was the basic idea of structuralism, and that is the main problem which was associated with these other approaches. They tried to simplify the reality too much. For humanism, everything was culture. For behavior, most of the things were determined by psychology. For QR, everything was economic, and all of them were short of the real thing. And this was what the radicalists and structuralists were critical, that you people are just isolating each of the phenomena and trying to simplify it too much. The real world is far more complex than you recognize. Until you recognize all these things, till that time, you will not be able to solve the problems. Okay? So can you understand now what is complex compound relationship? जल्दी बताओ मुझे. Complex compound relationship. ठीक है. Always relationship in most of the cases are dialectic, and thus it becomes so many loops that at a point it would become very, very complex reality. ठीक है. Ultimately a time will come when it would become a very, very complex reality. So we'll stop for today. We'll stop for today. We'll continue this tomorrow. Okay. And कल सबसे पहले we'll talk about these shortcomings of system analysis, and then we'll talk about that question which we talked about. Explore the concept of region as a system. No, Darshit, this is not the place to explain von Thunen model. That will come in economic geography at an appropriate place. So there I will be explaining the von Thunen model. ठीक है. Good night to all of you. Take care. We'll meet tomorrow.